Jack Smith's Deposition, Part 6. Phone Records and Fake Electors. Welcome to Law and Society. What I'm doing is reading out portions and excerpts from Jack Smith's deposition before the January 6th committee about Jack Smith's investigations against Donald Trump. And the reason why I'm doing it is because it is important to remember, more than ever before, what happened on January 6, 2021, and who is responsible for it. Especially since this is the first year that Donald Trump's foot soldiers who attacked the Capitol will be walking free and perhaps joining in Washington on January 6th. And this will be the first time that they will be doing that after being pardoned by Donald Trump. So it is important for the rest of us to remind each other of what the truth really is, which is what happened on January 6th. So in today's excerpts, you will see questions that really, go after Jack Smith, and then you'll see Jack Smith push back against Republican members of the committee. So I'll read the questions and then the answers. So you subpoenaed Speaker McCarthy's toll records after he became Speaker, and you sought records from November 2020 through January 8, 2021. What were you looking for with his records? Like, what did you do with the information you obtained? Smith: okay, so the relevance of those records, there would be several examples, but his contacts with either co-conspirators, the president, or conduits of information to the president was relevant to our investigation. An example I could give you is, on January 6th, we had information that Mark Meadows, who was present for a call when Congressman McCarthy was asking for help, he was asking the president to come to his aid while the Capitol was being seized. Getting the exact toll records for when that happened was relevant to our investigation, both to question other witnesses about it so we had an accurate timeline, and also to corroborate that the call happened at approximately the time witnesses said it happened. Question: nobody disputed the Speaker and the President were having communications on January 6th. So one way you could have gotten that information is you could have asked the Speaker's lawyer to look at his phone records and to give you the information you needed, right? I mean, that's just such a naive question. Well, you say that now, that nobody is disputing, but my experience in criminal investigations is that people often at trial dispute things that you never thought were going to be in dispute during the investigation. And so when I conduct a criminal investigation, I don't assume there will be no disputes. Having a record that is a hard record about a time and a timeline of that afternoon was particularly important because the violence had started. The president refused to stop it. He endangered the life of his vice president, and then he's getting calls. And not just calls from Democrats, not calls from people he doesn't know, calls from people he trusts, calls from people he relies on, and still refuses to come to the aid of the people at the Capitol. And that's very important evidence for criminal intent in our case. So you can see the pushback here. Question: you could have asked Representative Perry's lawyer. There's no evidence that Representative Perry or Speaker McCarthy was interested in obstructing your work, was there? Smith: I don't recall any evidence. I would say that Speaker McCarthy was interested in obstructing our work. With Congressman Perry, I should point out that the seizure of his phone happened several months before I was ever special counsel. I wasn't involved in that process. Question: after you became special counsel, what did the team do with a toll record for Jim Jordan? Jack Smith: well, I can tell you that, for example, there was contact on January 6th. Mark Meadows, when he interviewed, he referenced the fact that that afternoon, Chairman Jordan had been in contact with the White House. And like McCarthy's contact with the White House, it was relevant because, again, Meadows stated that these were supporters. These were credible people that the president relied on. What I recall was Meadows stating that I've never seen Jim Jordan scared of anything. And the fact that they were in this different situation now where people were scared really made it clear that was going to be what was going on at the Capitol could not be mistaken for anything other than what it was. And it goes back to that sort of information from someone who is a credible source of the president, proving that that actually happened and that there's actually a record of that call at exactly when it happened and what actions happened after that or didn't happen after that. Extremely probative to our case. Question: why was the IG's office serving these subpoenas? Smith: I obviously wasn't in that decision chain because I wasn't involved in the case. But my understanding is that Jeffrey Clark component of this investigation, he was a Department of Justice employee during the period of time that we were and my predecessors were investigating this. And it's my understanding that that was why they were involved in the investigation. Question: to the extent members of Congress and senators are up in arms that this happened to them and they're seeking accountability, who should be held accountable for answering these questions? And I kind of winked. And that was kind of because I was premature in the response Smith is going to give. Smith says, well, I think who should be accountable for this is Donald Trump. These records are people. In the case of senators, Donald Trump directed his co-conspirators to call these people to further delay the proceedings. He chose to do that. If Donald Trump had chosen to call a number of Democratic senators, we would have gotten toll records for Democratic senators. So the responsibility of why these records, why we collected them, that lies with Donald Trump. Question: did you tell Mr. Miller, the person who was one of the references for him to get the position that he has, you know what? President Trump has announced, and it may be considered, how did it go? Did you tell Mr. Miller, I'd be interested if there was an official special counsel? How did it go after President Trump announces? How did that conversation go? Smith: my recollection of this is that I was asked if I would accept the position if it were offered to me, and that was before President Trump announced his candidacy. Question: so the question ultimately is, it seems like the alternate electors matter. It seems like that the subject of a lot of starts and stops. And I wanted to know whether after you became the special counsel on November of 2022, were there any starts and stops, or was it full speed ahead on that probe? Smith: that was the part of the case that we investigated from the time I started until the indictment. It ended up being one of the most powerful parts of the case. We had electors who were going to be witnesses. I had referenced an earlier congressman from Pennsylvania who had said this was an attempt to overthrow the government. We had other electors who said, I was told this would only be used if we won in litigation. And obviously, the record in our case showed that co-conspirators were trying to use their elector votes despite that fact. And again, this goes to the point I made earlier. These are people who wanted to be electors for Donald Trump. They were not people who were opposed to him. They were not people who were from a different political party or enemies. And so the fact that we had elector witnesses like that who felt either they'd been misled or they felt this whole effort was an attempt to overthrow the government, I thought that was pretty powerful evidence. And so we moved that part of the investigation forward with the rest of the case. Question: how about the Fulton County DA's office with Fonnie Willis and Mr. Wade? Do you know if anyone from the special counsel team on your team had contact with them after you were appointed in November of 2022? Jack Smith: I will just say that one of the things we were investigating was things that happened in Fulton County, particularly. There was an election worker by the name of Ruby Freeman. She was the mother of a woman named Shay Moss. They were people that Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump targeted with absolutely false claims of election fraud, claims that Rudy Giuliani later admitted he didn't have evidence for, claims that he had been held liable on defamation for, caused them to endure all these sorts of vile threats. And that whole episode, as well as sort of the claims, the false claims about the vote count in Fulton County, we did look into that and collect evidence. So, with that said, that is today's episode about Jack Smith's deposition. Please come back in a couple of days and I will upload possibly the last two, if not the last three episodes of reading out the transcript. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I will post some other content in the meantime while you mull over what you hear. And if you want to read the transcript yourself or hear the recording, I've put that information in the description box. With that said, thank you so much for listening and take care.